In this video, I'm going to show you how you can write a C++ program that displays a menu and uses a loop to redisplay the menu until the user wants to quit. A lot of times when we work with menus, we'll put them inside a loop so that we can allow the user to select multiple options. Each time the user chooses an option, we'll execute that option and redisplay the menu. And this loop's going to continue until the user chooses to quit. So let's take a look at how this can look with pseudocode. I'm going to use a do-while loop for my menu because with do-while loops, we'll always execute the loop body at least once, and I want to display the menu at least one time. So I'll begin by showing the menu to the user. I'll get the user's choice. I'll do something with that choice. And then I'm going to go back up to the top of the loop and execute it again until the user chooses to quit or selects whatever option I have shown for quit. Menus also work well with the switch statement because we're going to execute one of several options. And so here is what the do while statement for the menu will look like with a switch embedded inside. Again, we're going to begin with the do loop by displaying the menu and getting the user's choice. To execute the user's choice, I'm going to use a switch statement. And whatever variable holds the user's choice, I'll put in the parentheses. And the body of my switch statement will have a case statement for each of the valid menu options. With each case statement, I'll do whatever code makes sense for that option, followed by a break, because I don't want my switch statement to fall through to the next option. And I'll have however many cases I need for the options on the menu. Often the last option is a quit option that the user may want to choose. And then the default works really well in this case because if this was a menu that only had 3 options and the user did not choose a 1, 2, or a 3, then I can display some type of error message because I know the user made an invalid selection. And that will finish out my switch statement. And then the rest of it looks like it did before. This do while loop will continue until the user chooses the option that in this case was case 3. So case 3 is when the user chose to quit, and the default is used whenever an invalid entry has been entered. So let's now go and build an example program with this, and I want to build a program that simulates an ATM machine. So now we'll build the program that simulates an ATM machine. And when I'm building a program like this where I have several options for the user, I want to build this iteratively, meaning I want to build each option one at a time, test that option, and then go and add additional options. That's going to make it a lot simpler to debug because if I've only added a little bit of code and it's not working, most likely the problem is somewhere with the new code that I just added. I've started the program here by creating my environment for my program. I'm using the IOStream and the IOMinip libraries because I want to display my dollar amounts or my money amounts with dollars and cents. And then I've begun the main function. Now for something that's using an ATM machine, we're going to be working with variables that have to do with the balance of the user's account and then an amount of funds that the user either wants to deposit or withdraw. So I'm going to use double variables for these. We're working with money, And while we may not have an ATM machine that's going to give out dollars and cents, the balance of the user's account may be in dollars and cents. So I'm going to create two double variables, one for amount and a second one called balance. And I'm going to go ahead and initialize balance to 0 because when this program begins, the user is not going to have any funds in their account. I'm going to need one other variable for the selection that the user makes from the menu. And with menus, we'll often use either a char data type or an integer data type. I'll just use an integer today, and so I'll call it int choice. And so there are my variables. I'm going to put all of them up there at the top. They're easy to find. If I'm wondering what variables I have later on, how did I name them, or what data type they are. And while we're at the top setting things up, let's just go ahead and set up our cout to use or to print our doubles using 2 decimal places since we're working with money here. So I'm going to say cout fixed and a set precision of 2, meaning when I'm working with fixed data types, I want to show exactly 2 decimal places regardless of what the decimal value is. And so this cout statement here on line 13 is not going to display anything on the screen, but it's going to set up the environment so that when numbers are displayed that are doubles, they will use 2 decimal places. I'll just put a little comment out there that the reason I did this is because I'm working with money. Now, before I get into working with the fact that I'm going to have do-while loops, I'm going to have switch statements, then I'm going to have to be building code for each of the options. I have a number of things going on in this program. I'm just going to begin first by getting the menu display working. And so I'm going to put the code out that just displays the menu, test that, make sure it looks like I want it to look, and then I'll go and add the other pieces around it. Okay, I've built the menu options here now. So I first have a title stating that it's an ATM machine. And then this program is going to have 4 options: view balance, deposit, withdrawal, and then finally quit. Then I'll prompt the user to enter their selection. I'm first going to just test this program with this to make sure this part's working. Now I'm going to compile this. And when I do, I expect to see some warnings because I'm not using the variables at the top, amount, balance, and choice. I will probably get a warning that I have unused variables. But that's okay, we're going to put them in there in a moment. So I'm going to use debug and start without debugging. And I do see the warnings appearing now for the variables choice and amount. It's interesting that balance is not flagged as an unused variable. I really didn't use it, but I did initialize it to 0, and I guess for this particular compiler, that's enough for it to think that it's a used variable. But once the program is compiled and it executes, it looks something like this. ATM machine, there's my 4 options, and that looks really good. Looks exactly like what I'm looking for. I'll go ahead and close that window, and then now let's go ahead and add the next thing that we need to do in this program, and that's to get the selection from the user. I'll put in here get selection, and then it's just going to be a matter of a simple cin statement followed by the variable that I'm going to use to hold the user's selection. For this program, I created a variable called choice, and that's what I'll use here. All right, so now we've displayed the menu and we have gotten the user's choice. We still haven't done anything with a loop, and we haven't evaluated the user's choice either. And really we could do it either way. But I'll go ahead and start today by building a loop around this. And so what I'm going to want to do is, for this program, most of the program is going to be inside the do while loop. And let's think about what we really want to put in there. Where do I start my loop? Well, line 13 does not need to be inside my loop because once we have set up the display of the decimal values or doubles, I don't really need to execute that line again. But what I am going to want to display over and over is my menu. So I'm going to put a do right after line 14 here. I'm going to type the opening curly brace there. Visual Studio helps me out by putting the partner curly brace or the ending brace out there for me. That's not quite where I want it. I'm going to delete that one. And when I scroll down, I'll probably see something get flagged as an error. And I do over here on line 28. I see that's underlined in red because it thinks that this closing curly brace has to do with the one with the do statement, and it wants to see a while. But I'm not finished typing, so as soon as I put the rest of this in here, that will take care of that problem. Also, Visual Studio is going to help me out with my indentations here. As soon as I add the closing curly brace, it's going to know that lines 16 through 25 go inside my do while loop. They are inside my code block, and it's going to automatically indent those lines of code for me to make it much more readable. So let's do that. I'll put the closing brace right here. Instantly, lines 16 through 25 get indented. And now, looks like a new thing's been flagged. That's my return statement. And it's still wanting to see that while that goes with my do. Now I'm going to add a while here. And we need to put some sort of condition inside the parentheses for my do while loop. And then with the do while loop, after we close the parentheses, we have to put a closing semicolon. So now we have a new error. And this error over here, as soon as I just hover my cursor over that little red line, I'm going to see it expected an expression. It really doesn't like for the while to not have some sort of expression in the parentheses. And so let's think about what we want to do. In which situation would we want this loop to stop executing? Well, we're showing a menu of 4 options, 1 through 4. If the user chooses number 4 to quit, then we don't want to display the menu again. So we can display this menu or execute this loop as long as choice is not equal to 4. So that's what I'm going to put in here, choice not equal to the number 4. And that gets rid of that error and any of the other errors. So now what this program has is it has a do while loop that's going to continue to display menu options and get a selection from the user. And it will display this over and over until the user chooses a number 4. So let's test this and see how this works. Even though I haven't built the code to do anything with options 1 through 3 or any type of error processing, I can test that the loop works and that the loop quits when we choose a number 4. And we have 1 fewer unreferenced local variables now. The amount is still unreferenced, but now we're using choice, so we'll see that that's been taken out of the warnings. And here's my program. I have my 4 menu options. Let's start out by choosing number 2. Well, we don't have any code to do anything with it yet. But what I can see is when I choose number 2, the loop gets executed and I see the menu again. I can try other things here like number 1. I can even try a number that doesn't make sense like 99. And I'm just going to see that menu over and over until I choose number 4. So I'll try that one, number 4, and then the program ends. So what have I shown here? I've shown that the loop functionality is working correctly. I'm seeing the menu over and over, and the loop is ending when it should end because the user chose the quit option. Now that the basic part of our do while loop is working, I want to go back and build code for each of the options. But I'm going to only build one option at a time. Then I'm going to test that option and come back and build the next option. In a sense, we've already built the quit option because we can see that that's working. So the next thing that I'm going to do is start my switch statement, and I'm only going to put in the code for option number 1. So where does the switch statement belong? I want to have the switch statement inside my do while loop, and as soon as I have my user's selection, or I've populated the choice variable, then I can go ahead and use switch to evaluate it. And I'm putting just a few little comments in here to point out to you what each of the different parts of the program are trying to do. If this were a real production program, I probably would not comment it to this level of detail, but I would want to add comments wherever I thought anything was not clear. All right, so our menu here has 4 options. I don't need anything in my switch statement for option 4 necessarily, unless I want to display a message or something. But we're just going to build a switch statement with one case statement. And so I'm going to put switch right here. And in the parentheses, I need to put the variable that I am basing my decision on. In this program, that variable is choice. I'll put choice in parentheses, and then I'll begin my switch code block. I'm first going to begin with the case where the user chose number 1. And the way I'm going to write this is based on the data type. Choice is an integer, so all I have to do is put an integer literal for the value here for the first option, and that's going to be integer literal 1, followed by a colon. And then case is going to jump over to the left. Visual Studio wants to line it up with switch, and that's fine. And just to make it offset and be really standing out that this is case number 1, I'm going to press enter and put all of the code that has to do with case 1 indented underneath the words case 1 colon. This option is when the user chose to view the balance. So this is going to be a pretty simple option to build. I'm just going to put one message here, see out. Your balance is, and followed by my variable balance and an end line. And that's all I really have to have for this case. However, once I start building additional cases, I don't want my switch statement to fall through to other options, so I'm going to put a break right here. And as soon as I enter that break, if the program were executing and hit that line of code, it would get out of the switch statement at that point. All right, so we have our first option built. Let's go ahead and test the program with that option. I probably won't see any more warnings. Oh, I do still have a warning for amount. I forgot I haven't used that one yet, but we'll be using that very soon. And here is my program again. There are my 4 menu options. If I choose 2 or 3, nothing's going to happen. But now if I choose number 1, I should see my balance. And I do, it tells me my balance is $0. We haven't made any deposits, so we have a balance of 0. And that looks like that's pretty accurate. I'll just finish this out by choosing number 4 to quit. And that's working fine still. So option 1 was pretty simple to build. That seems to be working. I think I'll go ahead and continue on and allow the user to make deposits into their account. So this will be case 2 because in our menu we listed deposit as option number 2. Oh, now here I have an error. And why is it not allowing me to add a second case? Let's go ahead and hover our mouse pointer over that line right there, and it says that my case label may only be used within a switch. Well, I'm close to a switch, but what I've done is I have not embedded this case label inside my code block for switch. If I click on the first opening brace there, I'll see that the switch goes all the way up through line 32, and line 33 is not inside of the switch statement. So I need to flip these 2 lines of code around. Do it like that, and now it should be fine. All right, what does case 2 need to do? We want to add a deposit to our account balance. And so I'm going to need to ask the user, how much do you want to deposit? So I'll give them a prompt. And whenever I am wanting to get something from the user, I'm going to need to put my prompt with a cout statement and then follow it with a cin statement to get an amount and store it in my local variable. I will use a cin right here, and now I'll finally use that amount variable. Let's go ahead and scroll this down a little bit. And now we've asked the user for the amount. We got the amount from the user. I now need to apply that amount to my balance. So I'm going to use a combined operator statement here, and I'm going to say balance plus equal amount. And that will complete the deposit. We'll just follow that up with a break statement. And that looks pretty good for option number 2. Let's test this one now. All right, so once again, here is my menu. And if I want, I can just jump right into deposit. There's no reason I have to view the balance first. So let's do a deposit, and let's add $200 to this account. All right, as soon as I finish option 2 and I make the deposit, I'm going to see that menu again. Now I want to view the balance, and if the deposit code worked correctly, I should see that my balance is now $200. So let's try that and find out. And sure enough, when I choose option number 1, I now see that my balance is $200. So it looks like that view balance is working, deposit's working, and quit's working. All right, now that we have options 1 and 2 working, let's continue on with option 3. Option 3 is that the user wants to make a withdrawal. This one's going to be a little more complicated than the other two, because I don't want to allow my user to have negative funds. It's going to start out quite a bit like the deposit. I'm going to put a prompt on the screen to tell the user what I'm looking for, and that is how much is the withdrawal. And once again, I'm going to use CN to get the amount off of the console window and store it in variable amount. But instead of just affecting the balance by subtracting amount from the balance, I want to make sure there are enough funds. So I'm going to put an if statement in here. And I'm going to see if I were to subtract amount from balance, would I still have funds in the account? That's what I want to check. I'm going to write it like this. If balance minus amount is greater than or equal to 0, then we'll go ahead and do that subtraction. Balance minus equal amount. Otherwise, or else, I'm going to display an error message and let the user know that they don't have enough money to make that withdrawal. I'll just keep it simple and say insufficient funds and leave it at that. Now you may have noticed when I'm writing these cout statements that sometimes I'm using Endl and sometimes I'm using a \n. Either are going to work fine for what I'm doing. Up here on line 30, I can't put a \n with the variable balance, so I'm going to have another part. So I might as well just put an Endl there. But on line 43, I am displaying a string literal on the screen, and I can embed a \n in that, and it just makes for a little bit less typing. But either way, it would have been fine to have said insufficient funds in the string literal, put another insertion operator, and follow that by an Endl. And that would be just fine too. All right, so with case 3, we got the withdrawal amount, we checked to see if we had enough funds, and if we did have enough funds, we subtracted that amount from the balance. I'll just follow this up with a break, and we'll test this program again. So first I'm going to try to do a withdrawal. My balance is 0, so let's say I wanted to withdraw just $10. That's not going to work. I don't have enough funds. And if I view the balance, I'll see that my balance is 0 as well. We aren't going to be able to do anything until we put money in this account. I'll come over here to deposit, and let's start working with some dollars and cents. So let's say it was like a paycheck, and I went and worked a few hours last week and I made $125.97. I didn't work all that hard, and now if I view my balance, I should see that that is the balance. Now I can withdraw money. I am going to withdraw $20. And I didn't really write this program to put a lot of confirmation out on the screen. It just says, okay, you want to withdraw $20. Let's view the balance to make sure that when I did do the withdrawal, it actually subtracted the $20 from my balance. And I do see that my balance is now $105.97. So what I have tested here is that I can view the balance, I can successfully make a deposit, and I can either do a withdrawal where I don't have enough funds, or I can do a withdrawal where I do have enough funds, and finally quit. So there's just one other thing I want to add to this program. And that's the fact that users do not always follow instructions. Up here at the top with our menu, we gave them 4 options. But our user may not choose 1 through 4. They may type a different number. And the switch statement's going to work really well with this. I can come down here on my switch statement and I can add a default. So let's do that. And a default is going to be anything that wasn't one of the cases. I'm going to say default colon and see out invalid selection. Try again. All right, so let's test this now. And I can view my balance. I can make a deposit of $50. View my balance again. That's kind of going off the screen here. And now I'm going to choose something that's wrong. I'm going to put in choice 99. And it tells me that's invalid. So that looks like the invalid selection logic is working just fine. I'll go ahead and put in a quit now. And what's interesting here is it did get out of the loop, but there's one little problem here. It also says invalid selection. Try again. And it didn't even allow me to try again. So something doesn't look quite right. It looks close to what I want, but not exactly what I want. So what's happening here? Let's look at the cases here for this switch statement. I have case 1, case 2, and case 3 and default. And what's going to happen is if the user chooses 4 to quit the program, there is no case 4. And so we're going to hit default on case 4, and then the program will display invalid selection. So I'm going to add one more case here, case 4. And I'm just going to put in a cout statement here, goodbye. And break once again. All right, and this is why we have to test everything that we do. Because if I didn't do things in this order, I might not have noticed that this wasn't working quite right. It wasn't far off, but it wasn't exactly what I wanted. Let's try it again. So there's my ATM machine. My balance is 0. Again, I want to put this where this shows on the screen a little better here. I'll link a withdrawal of $20 or $15. That's not going to work. Insufficient funds. I want to choose option 7. That's invalid. And now let's quit. This time, instead of getting invalid selection, I get goodbye. And now it looks like the program is working for all the scenarios in which I designed it for. So to summarize what we did here, I have used a do-while loop to display the menu of options and to execute the code for each option. The first thing in my do loop is the display of the menu. I get the user's selection, and now I'm using a switch statement to evaluate that user selection. I have a case statement for each of the menu options. Each case statement or case section here has a break at the end so that we don't fall through to the next section of code. And then at the end of my switch statement, I have a default to catch any other numbers that have been entered and aren't valid options. This do-while loop is going to execute until the user chooses number 4, because number 4 is the quit option. And then once the do-while loop ends, I don't have anything else in the program. The program will hit the return 0 statement on line 54, and the program will end.